Hey, what's up? I'm Leon and I want to talk about whether you should stay in Korea or Japan for a study abroad. The thing is, it's a decision that I have to make myself as well, and I want to make this video because I didn't find anything like that on YouTube so far. So I thought maybe I just do this video and share my thoughts on whether I should go to Korea or Japan. I think this is a big decision because you will stay in this country for at least 6 months, for some people even 1 year. So you should really think about whether you should go to Korea or Japan. Please note though, everything that I'm about to tell you is what I have learned online. I have never been to Japan or Korea. Maybe there's some Koreans or Japanese people that are watching this video that could say if the things that I'm saying are true or not. This would help me a lot and the people that are still deciding whether they should go to Korea or Japan. Without further ado, let's begin. First, let's talk about food. Food is a very important part. And if you like food, Japan and Korea will be great for you. There's still some differences in the food. Japan is an island. This means they cook a lot with fish. And sometimes they don't even cook the fish, which is sushi. Japanese food tends to be less spicy than Korean food. So if you're not into spicy foods, Japanese foods may be more for you. Now let's talk about Korea. As I said before, Korea has a lot of spicy foods. Also, because they are on the mainland, they do not have as much seafood in their food as Japan, for example. So if you're not into fish that much, Korea may be a better choice for you. But for the food category, I have to give both countries 3 stars because both foods are really good. Okay, now let's talk about drinking. Drinking is very important in both countries. Korea is supposed to be the heaviest drinker upon all Asian countries. So if you're really into drinking, Korea is the place to go. This doesn't mean that people in Japan drink no alcohol, they just drink less alcohol. And the most famous alcohols from Korea and Japan are sake from Japan and soju from Korea. So if you're into soju, Korea is obviously the place to go. If you're into sake, obviously Japan is the way to go. But just because Koreans drink more, I have to give them more points. So if you're really into drinking, Korea is better for you. So I will give Korea 3 points and Japan 2 points because they still drink a lot, even in Japan. Okay, now that we have talked about drinking, we also have to talk about making friends. I've heard that Japanese people are supposed to be very shy. In my own experience, I have met only one Japanese guy in my entire life and he was super chill and I immediately got friends with him. So I can't really approve that Japanese people are shy. The guy that I have met could be just an exception to the rule, so I don't really know. Now let's look at Korea. As I have heard, Koreans are way more outgoing than Japanese people. Means if you want to make friends, it is supposed to be easier to make them in Korea based on their attributes that Koreans are more outgoing than Japanese people. But I think it's hard to say something about the whole country, because in every country there are people that are shy or more outgoing. So it's hard to say. But there's still one measurement that we can use to determine whether it's easier to make friends in this country or in this country. And it's the ability to speak English. Let's be real, most of you guys won't achieve the level of fluency in Korean or Japanese within 6 months. So the ability of locals to speak English is very important if you want to make local friends. And the chance to find someone that speaks English well is higher in Korea than it is in Japan. So therefore I have to give Korea more points on the making friends category than Japan. Because as I have heard, most Japanese people don't speak English at all. Or at least they're just too shy to speak it. I will give Korean 2 points and Japan 1 point in the making friends category because even though Koreans speak more English than Japan, the English is most of the time not that good. Means you will still have trouble speaking with the majority of people. So Korea 2 points and Japan 1 point. Please note though, if you can speak Korean or Japanese, making friends will be a lot easier in both countries. Still, according to most people, it will be easier to make friends in Korea than in Japan. Since we have already spoken about speaking the local language, let's talk about learning the language. I just have to say it, if you want to learn Japanese, you have to climb mountains. Like I started to learn Japanese and damn, you have to learn 3 alphabets. You have to learn hiragana, katakana and kanji. And the problem with kanji is there are over 70,000 kanjis that you have to memorize. I talked with my Japanese friend and he told me that you only need about maybe 300 to 400 kanjis and you will be good. Still, 300 to 400 kanjis is a lot of kanjis that you need to know. But I think Japanese sounds so cool. Speaking wise, Japanese sounds better. Learning wise, Japanese really sucks. Now let's look at Korean. The Korean alphabet is way easier than the Japanese alphabet, obviously, but I've heard that in Korean there are tough grammar rules. So even though the reading will be easier, it will be hard to speak it. Still, I think Japanese is one of the hardest languages in the world. Means if you just want to learn the easier language, you should go for Korean. Therefore, I will give Korean 2 points and Japanese 1 point. Because Japanese really sucks to learn. It's just very hard. Okay, now that we have talked about the language, we can talk about actually studying there. Because in Japan, most universities require you to speak Japanese almost fluently on N2. N2 is the level that is required by most universities before you can apply to the university. Means you have to put in a lot of effort to get into the university because learning the language, as I said, is really tough. There are a few universities that don't require you to speak Japanese fluently because they will then teach in English, but like I said, there are only a few universities that do that. Most universities that I have seen require you to do an ijo, which is a Japanese test in which you prove that you can speak Japanese on a fluent level. If we now look at Korea, there are more universities that let you study in Korea without even speaking one single word of Korean. This because in most Korean universities there are always classes in English, while in Japan most universities only teach in Japanese. But you have to remember, in Korea the most hardworking people are the students. So if you want to study full-time in one of those countries, Korea might be not the ideal choice because, like I said, in Korea the most hardworking people are the students. This doesn't mean that in Japan the students are lazy. It just means in Korea they have to study way more, because if they don't get into the top universities and get top grades, they will get no job after finishing the university. It's a little bit different in Japan, so the student life is easier for Japanese people than for Korean people. But since you're a foreigner and just want to do an exchange semester, it is not that tough for you. Because I've heard from many people that studied in Korea and Japan that is considerably easy compared to German universities. This is probably because foreigners get like a bonus. They probably don't have to do the same classes as Japanese or Korean people. So if you just study there one semester, it will be similarly from the difficulty. Even though the difficulty is kind of the same in both countries, it is easier to apply in Korean universities without having to speak the local language. Therefore, I have to give Korean 2 points and Japan 1 point for studying. Okay, since we now have talked about studying, let's talk about what it will cost you to actually study there. So I was shocked when I found that Korea is so much cheaper than Japan. I thought both countries were on a similar level, but Korea is just way cheaper than Japan. In Korea, in Seoul, you can get a good apartment for around 500 euros. And they even start with 300 euros. Means it is that cheap. Like you're in the biggest city of the country and you can get an apartment for 500 euros. But let's say we don't want to have an apartment, we want to stay at the campus, then it's even cheaper, because with food you can get around 700 euros to 800 euros per month. This is already including food. In Japan, on the other hand, if you stay on the campus, you have to pay around 1000 euros per month. It's still cheaper than in most Western countries, but 300 euros is a lot of money that you have to pay less each month. I would also like to give you an estimate on how much you have to pay for an apartment in Tokyo. The thing is, I have not found anything on Airbnb that's below 1000 euros. So if you're on a budget, Korea would be the place to go. Even though Korea is way cheaper than Japan, if you look at both countries from a broader view, both countries will be very cheap if you are coming from a country like Germany, the US or Canada. This means I have to give Japan at least 2 points and Korea 3 points, because they're still both cheap, even though Korea is cheaper than Japan. But still, if you're on a budget, you should go to Korea, I think. I forgot to write something on the board that I still find very important to talk about, and it's safety. You will be safe in both countries, especially if you're a male. As a woman, there are some things you have to think about before going to each country. In Japan, there's a big problem with creeps that steal underwear from women and make pictures under the skirt. So you definitely have to think about that before going to Japan. And in Korea, I have heard that women have trouble going partying alone because some Koreans tend to drag those women into their cars if it's late at night. So this is also one thing that you have to think about before going to Korea. Besides those two things, both countries are very safe. So these are just 2 points that you have to research before going to one of those countries. Still, I have to give both countries 3 stars, because even though of these problems, there is little harm that is going to happen to you, at least physically. So you will be safe. Okay, now we have talked about safety and the prices. Let's talk about finding a job. If you go there, you maybe want to return someday after you graduated and maybe want to work there. So where is it easier to find a job if you finished your degree? As a foreigner, you have trouble in both countries finding a job, but since it's easier to speak English in Korea, there will be more job opportunities for you in Korea, especially if you graduate in engineering or in something with IT. Same goes for Japan. Engineers and IT workers have it easier to get into the country. The problem with Japan though, most Japanese companies require you to speak Japanese fluently. That's because most Japanese people don't speak English at all. So if you want to work in Korea, it is sometimes fine that you can only speak English, while in Japan you have to speak Japanese, which makes it harder for you to go there. Therefore, because Korean just have more job opportunities for people that speak English only, they get 2 points, while Japan gets only 1 point. Okay, let's say you have found your job. How is working in one of those countries? Working in Japan sucks. You most likely have to work long hours. In Japan, there are black companies, which are essentially sweatshops. They require you to work extra hours without pay. So if you go to Japan, you have to be careful with those companies. Also in Japan, there's this problem with people literally working themselves to death. Because in Japan, many people work so much and sleep so little that they just die from overworking, which is crazy in my opinion. The working culture is so extensive in Japan that it is common to see workers sleeping on the street on their way home. I would love to say that Korean is way better than Japan, but it is not. Even though I've never heard about Korean people sleeping on the street because they're too overworked, they still have very long hours. As I have heard, most Korean people work about at least 10 hours a day, and many Koreans even have a second job so they can earn more money. Keep that in mind if you really want to work in one of those countries. There's still something that I want to add to Japan. In Japan, there's this unspoken rule that you're not allowed to leave before your boss leaves. Means if your boss decides to do a 12-hour shift, guess what? You have to do a 12-hour shift as well. This is the reason why working in Japan is worse than it is in Korea. Just for that fact, I have to give Japan 1 point and Korea 2 points. Because even though Korean working also sucks, it does not suck as much as Japanese working. Okay, now let's talk about immigrating. Let's say you have your job and you're happy with it, and now you want to stay there. How long does it take to immigrate to one of those countries? How long does it take to become a permanent resident? In Japan, it will most likely take you 10 years to become a permanent resident. 5 of these years you have to be in Japan with a working visa. In Korea, on the other hand, you only have to be there 5 years to become a permanent resident. Also, in both countries there are some shortcuts to get a permanent resident faster. First, by marriage. In Japan, you have to be married to a Japanese woman for 3 years, or to a Japanese man for 3 years. And in Korea, it is 2 years. Also, in both countries, there's a system for highly skilled people, which makes the process of becoming a permanent resident easier and faster. In Japan, it takes around 3 to 5 years to become a permanent resident as a high-skilled person. And in Korea, it takes around 2 to 5 years. So you will get permanent residence easier in Korea than in Japan. So for that fact, I also have to give Korea 2 points and Japan 1 point. So now let's calculate how many points we have for each country. We have 17 points for Japan and 24 points for Korea. So based on this chart, studying in Korea is better than in Japan, especially if you want to stay there long term after you have graduated. And please tell me in the comments if I forgot something that is very important, because I have not decided myself whether I should go to Japan or Korea. And if some of the things that I have said are wrong, also let me know in the comments. Many people that are watching this video can't decide, and you will help them a lot if you just say if it's true or not. Alright, thank you for watching, have a nice day and goodbye.